Welcome to Pittsburgh Earth Days, The Dirt Podcast, featuring Grant Ervin, live from the Point Park University Center for Media Innovation. Here is your host, Grant Ervin.
Hello, and welcome to The Dirt Podcast. I'm your host, Grant Ervin, and welcome to the Center for Media Innovation at Point Park University. In this installment of The Dirt, we have our friend from Giant Eagle, Dan Donovan, Senior Director of Corporate Communications. Dan, how you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me, Grant, and hello, listeners.
Yeah, it's good to have a friend from Giant Eagle. I was just telling, for listeners, I was just telling Dan I was over at the Waterworks store over the weekend, so got to see you guys in action and meet all my friends and neighbors over there. It's always like a place of confluence. You always see somebody you know at the grocery store. So
it is the one trip we all seem to do at least weekly, right?
At least weekly. Sometimes more than weekly.
Sure.
I always like the question, did you get everything that you need? And I'm like, yes, the list is checked off, but I also found a bunch of stuff that I didn't think I need.
Are you a list maker?
I'm a list maker, but I always deviate from
it.
There's always something that along the way I'm like, oh, well, I could put this in that recipe, or what if we have this on Tuesday, or those sorts of things. So I keep to the list, but I always kind of find a way to expand.
That's great.
So it always
great.
Works out. Well, hey, Dan, let's get started here. Maybe first off for listeners, maybe explain a little bit about who you are and how you came to Giant Eagle. And then your role as the Senior Director of Corporate Communications, what all that entails.
Sure. So I've been with Giant Eagle for 15 years. Not native to Pittsburgh, but I spent my undergraduate time at Duquesne University.
Right, go Dukes.
So coming out of Duquesne, go Dukes. Coming out of Duquesne, I spent some time at an advertising agency, Mark USA.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And after about a year, right there in Squation Square, after about a year, I was lucky enough to convince someone that I could add some value to Giant Eagle. So I've been fortunate enough to be at Giant Eagle for the past 15 years, spending all of my time in communications and community. Mm-hmm. On the communications side, I do most of my work with local news media partners. That's really just about making, like we're doing today, making sure that our communities are aware of the work that we're doing and making sure that they know that we're doing everything we can to provide fresh foods and keep them safe and do all these important things. On the community side, it's focusing really in three distinct areas. One is in the area of food insecurity, something really always important, but certainly highlighted during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Another area is inclusion, equity, and diversity. So partnering with our Chief Diversity Officer and other folks to advance work in that important space. And then lastly, on environmental sustainability. We've got a core team inside of our four walls that I partner with to advance all that important work as well.
That's amazing. It's great to see that and important to have somebody that's pushing that message out, particularly for a company the size of Giant Eagle. It's a name brand. It's a familiar name that I think just about everybody in Pittsburgh recognizes. But could you talk a little bit about the company?
Sure.
It's more than just a grocery store, right? Like there's a lot of moving parts that are going on, both in terms of the organizations and the operations. So maybe a little bit about Giant Eagle.
Absolutely. So a little bit of a history lesson. Giant Eagle was founded in 1931 right here in Pittsburgh, founded by 5 families. Here 90 years later, we are still family-owned, privately held. Each of those 5 families has members of the family working throughout our organization today. Wow. Our CEO, Laura Corrett, is a member of one of those 5 families. We take a lot of pride in being family-focused, family-oriented. When you talk about the store, when you talk about the Waterworks Market District, that is a family in that store. And hopefully our customers feel that when they see their guy in the produce, they see their gal over in the deli, and we certainly feel that way about one another. We have today 470 stores across 5 states. That's Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland, and Indiana. More than half of those stores, oddly enough, are actually our Get-Go Cafe Plus Market stores. So we have more Get-Go locations than we do supermarkets.
Interesting.
Then the remainder are Giant Eagle supermarket locations. In addition to folks working in retail, we have 5 what we call retail support centers, distribution warehouses across our footprint. And then we have a large corporate office staff, most of whom who are located in Western PA as well.
Great. And talk a little bit about that growth. I mean, so from like a family-owned business in the 1930s, which I'm assuming it started out as a little storefront, and all of a sudden it starts to grow and expand. What has that growth been like for the company, and maybe the evolution of the supermarket?
I think what's really what we as a company never lose track of is the importance of the traditional supermarket. And we can sit here for more than the time than we have today talking about how the supermarket has evolved with great players like Walmart and Amazon doing lots of amazing things. But it's not just a business; it's a responsibility, right? So how do you serve your communities with this critical need? But then from a business perspective, how do you do it in a way that continues to make you relevant and innovative? So started as a traditional supermarket and certainly grew in that space. Started in Pittsburgh, headed west. Then saw a complementary need for something like fuel. We were one of the first companies in the country to have a fuel-based loyalty program. What started as shopping at Giant Eagle, saving on fuel, now has this whole cyclical nature of you can also do the opposite. So that was a big space for us in terms of how do we grow the business in ways that continue to be relevant for our customers. And then you go more recently, innovation in terms of technology. Not just during the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, and certainly as a result of the pandemic, online ordering is such an important part of how we're getting food. During the pandemic, certainly needed. We were all instructed to stay indoors. We were all instructed to not go into businesses. We were fortunate enough to be a critical resource for the communities, and we were fortunate enough to have, for about a decade prior, almost a decade prior, started building this online ordering capability that allowed us to be there for our folks. Coming full circle, actually last month, when we talk about the pandemic and talk about people with challenges of access, just last month we were approved to start allowing EBT SNAP payments online as well, which was a huge hurdle for any retailer right now. Amazon and Walmart got approved for that early on in the pandemic.
Because the regulatory market?
Exactly,
Okay.
Exactly. And so you went through this pandemic, and so many of us felt blessed and fortunate that we were able to stay home and order our groceries and either go pick them up at curbside or have them delivered. But there's a huge audience of folks who weren't able to do that.
Yeah.
So understanding the unique community needs and really being there however our communities best need us is really what we've tried to focus on.
It's interesting. I mean, you talk a little bit about kind of data technology and the community aspect of that is really close. So like knowing your customer is really, it's absolutely essential in every business, but I would say in the grocery business, even more in particular. What are some of those ways that you guys are using data or on-the-ground community assets to start to help address the needs of communities or things that you see in that space? Yeah,
so we can certainly talk about using the information that we gather in the Giant Eagle Advantage card, which is all kept within our four walls confidentially, but using that to improve the store experience and not just improve the flow of the store per se, but also improve the offers we give Grant or we give Dan or we give Sally. We can actually make very personalized offers that are relevant to how you shop. So that's really important.
Just a quick interjection because it's just hearing you say that makes me laugh because my wife, we just got our little circular the other day and her name's Amy and it was like, Amy, here are some things that you might find interesting at Giant Eagle.
Yeah.
And she's in marketing as well. And so she's like, this is great.
Were the items relevant?
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, 9 of the 10 items I ended up, buying, because they were like back to school items and things like that. So yeah, I mean, that's that type of customer attention that's like super detailed.
Yeah.
And people really appreciate.
And that's carried through, by the way, we can talk about technology all day long. That's carried through by the folks at store level too. So we actually empower our store team members to pick products that are relevant for their customers. So the folks shopping at the Township of Pine Market District, we know may have very different interests than the folks shopping at the Squirrel Hill Giant Eagle or the Village Square Market District or the Camp Horn Giant Eagle. And while we can, we corporate office team members can sit from where we are and we can make best guesses, it's the folks who are in store talking to the guest every day, who are seeing the trends, seeing the weekly shopping trends, who are best to decide, hey, this product would meet an interest and a need here in a way that other stores might not have.
It's super, just a quick plug. I didn't think about mentioning this before we came online here, but both my aunt and uncle are Giant Eagle alumni.
Wow.
They retired from Giant Eagle probably about 10 years ago now. My uncle was a butcher for probably about 30 years with the company. And, he would always talk about that. Like people would come in and consult him, Ken, what do you think about this? And what we're going to be cooking this over the weekend, will it save? What type of cut of meat's the best? And same thing with my aunt. She was, on the marketing side, the customer side of facing product.
Yeah. And
just understanding what people's needs are and how to direct them the proper way is such an important piece of customer service.
Yeah, and we've got a lot in Pittsburgh and across our communities, a lot of other retailers doing a lot of really great things. We truly feel like where our differentiation is our people, and how we service our communities, and also being local. Not just being local because 90 years ago it just so happened that 5 families were here based in Pittsburgh, but because of our regional footprint, we have access and we can take the time to build partnerships with a lot of local purveyors. So we can actually bring this notion of local, which absolutely has ties into things like net zero carbon commitments and the like, to really think differentiate us amongst others.
Just touch upon that for a quick second. The local purveyor component is huge. I mean, it's just building people into the supply chain and whatnot. But what are some of those things that you've seen through the pandemic? You mentioned three very critical pieces as part of your work. The issues of foods insecurity, diversity, equity, inclusion, and then environmental sustainability. Maybe one by one, from a pandemic point of view, because we're still in the midst of this, the food insecurity issue has become frighteningly paramount in terms of the number of families that don't have access to fresh, healthy foods. Some of that is because of supply chain disruption. Sometimes it's economic impact. Sometimes it's locational. I mean, what are some of the things that Giant Eagle is recognizing as part of that challenge?
Yeah. So first and foremost, across 90 years, Giant Eagle, I feel, has done any number of really impactful things in the space of community giving. At the end of the day, we are a food retailer, and where we can have the biggest impact is in helping fight food insecurity. Certainly a journey that started long before the pandemic. The pandemic, again, only highlighted certain things. But, where we are today is really trying to understand the various ways we can support food insecurity. What do I mean by that? So during the pandemic, not only did we increase our financial and product donations to regional food banks, we also launched a more than year-long register campaign where we invited customers to also donate money to help. And team members, of course, donated as well. Over the course of 16 months, we were able to donate nearly 40 million meals as a result of all those efforts. So putting foods in the hands of those who are at urgent need is certainly one way. Another way is just access. So maybe I don't have the financial barriers to getting my hands on food, but I literally don't have a store near me to do that. We've done a lot of work in the past year to help understand how do we increase access. It ranges from everything from partnering with local communities. Just last week, we were in the Sheridan community with the Jasmine Nairi campus. We're launching
project.
I agree. Launching a community pickup point there. So, think of it this way. Right now, you can have Giant Eagle deliver groceries to nearly any household in the Pittsburgh area. But there's a convenience fee there, and those are costs that that are real. But if you're someone in a community like Sheridan who has the challenge with access and also partnering with the challenge of financial difficulty, being able to know that you can go to your nearby community center at the Jasmine Nairi campus and have those groceries ordered or delivered, for you and there for pickup could be a huge benefit. So launching efforts like that, the enablement of EBT and online payments, huge for us and for our communities. And then even thinking outside the box, we're investigating things like what does it mean to put a supermarket on wheels and take that to your community? And how can you get
like mobile delivery?
Well, not mobile delivery, a mobile supermarket, actual supermarket on wheels in the community. So early stages of that research, but we think that could be really impactful because it's even ordering online. There's a uniqueness to you go to the Waterworks Market District. I'm going to guess you like looking at the produce. You like picking out your favorite melon. You like doing because that's you know what you're looking for.
It's a physical experience.
Yeah. So while we invest a lot of time and energy to making sure that we actually train our own Giant Eagle team members, just so you know, if you order online at Giant Eagle, it's a Giant Eagle team member shopping that order for you. So just like you get to know your teams in store, the people who shop in our stores are doing it all day, every day. Nevertheless, we understand that some folks might just say, I just have a unique way that I like to shop the store. So having this idea of a supermarket on wheels going to our communities in need, we think enables them to have that kind of empowerment as well.
That's super innovative. We did at the city, we did an analysis 2 years ago now called the Feed Pittsburgh Report.
Okay.
And that was one of the things that we saw in the food insecurity space was exactly that, is that many times transportation or physical topographical, geographical barriers are some of the leading causes for people not accessing food. Mm-hmm. So thinking out of the box in that sense by providing a mobile solution could definitely be innovative.
Yeah, we were talking about a community like Homewood. And hey, wouldn't it be great to launch a community pickup point like we've done with Jasmine Nairi campus in Sheridan? And we had a gentleman from Just Harvest talking to us, and he said, now, just so you know, one community pickup point in Homewood's great, but Homewood is a big community.
It's a big community,
so
right?
Even within one community, one solution may not meet everyone's needs. Mm-hmm. So it's been eye-opening, candidly, for the past year for us. And we think we've made a lot of progress, but we know we have a far great distance to go. Mm-hmm. But we're proud of the work we've done so far, for sure.
Moving on to kind of the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, kind of under that banner. Obviously, the social challenges and racial justice issues that have been so prominent over the recent weeks, days, months, years, decades, etc. How has Giant Eagle kind of addressed that conversation?
Yeah. So we've made, first and foremost, it's important to our leadership and our company that this is a very open journey for us. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is last summer, we actually made key commitments publicly known of spaces where we want to grow. Example, we want to grow the percent of black leadership throughout our organization. Not 2000, I think it's a 2000 census, maybe 2010, excuse me, said that 14% of the American population is black. Mm-hmm. Our leadership for that population is not at that level. Mm-hmm. So putting a lot of work into understanding who are current black team members that are interested in growth, how do we seek new talent outside the company to complement that, but growing that leadership profile is really important. Also, increasing the number of black-owned products we sell in our stores. We hired, about, I think, 8 months ago, a supplier diversity manager whose sole focus is understanding, there's a wealth of black-owned products, whether they're products we can sell on our shelves or just services we can have as part of our business, increasing that exponentially. Food access is another key commitment we've made to try to increase access to food for communities that are predominantly black but underserved. Really just trying to find out, again, there's so many unique communities, there's so many unique ways to tackle an issue. How do we get into that? Starting, again, with our own team members and understanding that even if all you do is have a conversation, as long as you do so in an open manner, as long as you do so in a way where you want to learn, you are far ahead of the game. So a lot of what we've done is we've brought in speakers internally to talk to our teams and just offer different perspectives because I don't know what it's like to be somebody else, but shame on me if I don't try to understand.
Right, to put yourself in their situation and understand with empathy and also with purpose. You hit on something there that's interesting about the kind of the supplier side. The issues over the pandemic for every business has been some sort of supply chain disruption. What does that look like for Giant Eagle, both in terms of making sure product hits the shelf, but also in terms of issues like diversity or local access? How have you guys kind of worked in that space to, build more resilience into your supply chain? Yeah.
So if you just look at pandemic and supply chain, it's so interesting that the moment, we'll use my friends in the news media, the moment the news media lets you know that something like toilet paper might be an issue, I mean, the response is overwhelming.
Right.
And you can't, it's hard to get ahead of that. It's hard to predict that sometimes.
Yeah.
So a small hiccup, and I'll use the word hiccup in the supply chain, which, our teams do a marvelous job of making sure that even when there are these hiccups, we're getting product onto our shelves and into our consumers' homes. When that happens, we can fix that, we can address that. But when the groundswell starts, it's hard to push back against that. So that becomes one issue. On the issue of diversity, it really comes back to us being a regional retailer and our ability to get into our communities. There's a gentleman named Paul Abbott who leads our market district business, but also spends a lot of time in the merchandising space. He actually works with local purveyors all along their growth journey. So I might be someone who makes a really delicious peanut butter, but I don't even know how to package it,
right.
let alone how to put a label on it, how to make sure it's QA approved, and how to talk to someone like Giant Eagle.
Right.
So Paul and his team has made a specific effort to really identify these products and grow and help these purveyors grow, because when you think about your traditional supermarket, I would argue there's really two ways to differentiate yourself from a product selection. There is your store brands, what we call in Giant Eagle our own brands.
Right.
Put a Giant Eagle logo on it, put a Market District logo on it. Another store literally can't sell that. We think, though, our ability to identify and find and feature these local products because of our regional nature is also something else where you can go, I can find that at Giant Eagle. I can't find that elsewhere.
How does that, that sounds fascinating. How does that work? So what's Paul?
Yeah.
So is he out, going to farmers markets? Is he, how is he finding those prospects, I guess?
Community partnerships.
Okay.
Just who do you know, right? I'm trying to think of the
I
folks.
heard he heard a rumor that there's a really great salsa out there.
Well, there's and shame on me for not knowing the name. There's an innovation center, I think also in Homewood, and the name's going to escape me, and I will apologize and email and follow up later. But there are enterprises in our community that are gearing their efforts toward helping entrepreneurs grow their businesses.
To kind of incubate that.
Incubate,
Right,
exactly.
right.
So whether it's universities or whether it's these businesses, we are establishing partnerships with these folks. When we started our commitment to help support our Black team members and neighbors, we donated money to charities. One of the areas was, hey, we have a commitment to grow our Black-owned products. Let's invest money and build relationships into these spaces as well. So it's about building relationships, identifying partners who are doing the work, and now we can play a unique role. Some folks are saying, I just need to figure out how to get inside of the supermarket.
Right.
Well, that's where we can step in.
And so you can kind of take it from incubation stage all the way to getting on a shelf.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's an event coming up here in Pittsburgh, Barrel and Flow.
Okay.
It's a minority beer-focused festival. We are going to be selling some of these Black-owned brewery beers in our stores for a few weeks in September, in the Shadyside Market District and the Waterworks Market District, different Pittsburgh area stores. But these are folks, we actually had to work with the festival and work with the brewers to help them understand. We loved the idea before we realized, can we actually do this?
Yeah.
So reaching out to those brewers, reaching out to folks like Paul, reaching out to our beer merchandise leaders and say, okay, what are the mechanics to actually make something like this possible? Because number one, it's getting access to, I'm sure, really high quality product. And number two, it allows us to increase the diversity of the products we sell.
That's amazing. On the other side of that, though, is long supply chains. Like we mentioned, the toilet paper conundrum, right?
Yeah.
So what happens when a product gets disrupted in, say, California or Mexico, or what does that look like in terms of getting it to the shelf here in Pittsburgh?
So there's two things that happen, right? Number one, you're diversifying in a different sense. You're diversifying where you're sourcing the product.
So you get multiple sources.
Yeah, right. So you better make sure that you're going to your other sources to do that. And then worst case scenario, and we did have this experience through the pandemic, encouraging, if not asking, customers to limit how much they purchase.
Wow.
And it's something that if we all do this together, we're going to get through it. And I understand. I only know what it's like to run one household, and I've got 4 kids, and the toilet paper we use is what we use. So I understand the challenges there. But if we can be thoughtful, if we can think of the other person, we can get through challenges like that. So it's increasing your diversity of where you're sourcing the product from out of the outset, and then also where needed, working with customers to say, hey, let's make sure we have enough to share.
Be judicious about it. Yeah, that's interesting. Just to push on a little bit here, so that the journey of the company, we met, I think it was a couple years ago, talking about eliminating the blue bag, and so kind of plastics reductions and recycling, but the journey of the company in recycling and sustainability in general it's not just in the last couple years. This is part of the ethos of the company. Can you talk a little bit about some of the steps that you guys have taken, over the last, say, 4 or 5 years in terms of increasing or enhancing environmental sustainability?
Sure. So, it's hopefully goes without saying that businesses are only as healthy as the communities that they serve. So it's inherent for us as businesses to be promoting our communities and promoting that community health. At Giant Eagle, that feeds right into our purpose. Our purpose focuses on 3 things. 1, providing our communities with healthy, safe food and medicine, excuse me. Number 2, ensuring that everyone gets the respect that they deserve, critical to everything we do. And then third is protecting our planet for future generations. We want to do it because it's the right thing to do. We want to do it because we have 34,000 team members for whom we want to be able to have good, long-lasting lives and long-lasting communities. But we also, as a business, realize that we are only as good as the communities that we are serving. So at our core, focusing on our planet is really important. You go back more than 5 years. You go back 10, 15 years, how did this manifest itself? We're doing things like LEED certifying stores. We're doing things like starting to get into this electric vehicle charging stations at a handful of our supermarkets, just kind of pilot it, but a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of usage at that time. We're certainly doing things like plastic bag recycling bins outside of our stores. We're recycling cardboard and doing a lot of those things that are a little bit behind the scenes in some cases, but more just everyday operations. You fast forward to December 2019, we get a strong urging from our leadership that says, guys, we've got to do more. We've got to be more ambitious. And what we started doing in December of 2019 was what is intended to be a series of very ambitious sustainability commitments. Started with eliminating all single-use plastics from our operations by 2025. In the span of early January to mid-March, across the stores where we removed single-use plastic bags as a first a part of that project, 20 million bags we prevented from going into landfills.
Wow.
And that's not 3 months.
No.
So really powerful work there. Pandemic starts. None of us know what it means to have a virus transmit on packaging and such. And what that did was that prevented us from allowing reusable bags to be used in our stores. It was at that time, how do you control what is in our stores? One of the things is you ask customers, please don't bring reusable bags. Well, if I don't bring my own reusable bag,
oh my God,
and you don't have a plastic bag for me, I'm out of luck.
Everybody has their shirt kind of undone.
That's
carrying
right.
stuff out, right?
That's right. So that was a part of that journey. Obviously, a lot of great work continued throughout the pandemic, but that had a pause. We're looking at this point, early calendar year, to really start to pick that single-use plastic bag project back up.
In 22.
In 22. Thank you. Calendar year 22. And then while the pandemic kind of put a pause to some of those ambitious goals, here we are a year plus later with finally our second, and that's to be net zero carbon in terms of our operations by 2040.
Wow. That is an amazing. And so what does that mean for a company like Giant Eagle to be net zero carbon?
So when you think of it this way, the EPA says that the average supermarket, one supermarket, in a calendar year emits the same amount of carbon dioxide as 635,000 vehicles driven for a year.
Wow.
I mean, it's hard when the numbers are big like that. You don't know how to really put your head around them.
Right.
But it's a lot of cars.
That's a lot of cars.
It's a lot of cars. Yeah. So
do you ever notice that whenever people make that calculation, they always pick on cars? Not saying that's a good or bad thing. It's like, this is how many cars we're getting off the road. It's like,
yeah, that's so funny.
Which also reminds me of the adage that whenever you're sitting in traffic, remember that you're part of the problem.
Oh yeah,
absolutely,
so that's absolutely. So that's one supermarket. So we know we've got 210 plus supermarkets across our footprint. That's a lot of cars over a year. So again, going back to our responsibility, we have a responsibility to affect change. It is the second week of August right now. The UN just issued a scientific report, right?
Just this morning,
where I think it was, Grant, correct me. Over the next 2 decades, global temperatures going up 1.5 degrees Celsius. That is regardless of what we as individuals, we as businesses, or we as communities either start doing or keep doing today.
It's going to happen.
That is happening, and the impact on that, we can certainly talk about now or later. So what do? We need to step up. We're fortunate that over the last, we actually recognized this need for this commitment years ago. Between 2013 and this year, we reduced our carbon emissions footprint by 22%. And that's before we make the big announcement and before we push forward. So already we're 22%. Now our focus is on between now and 2030, getting to 50%, and between 2030 and 2040, getting to net zero.
That's amazing. And so for you guys, just to understand the business, that is, you have a physical plant, that's the building, right? So that you mentioned LEED certification, so that's your energy consumption, designing the building in a way that performs Also, you have tons of refrigeration, right?
Absolutely.
So that's like one of the huge things. In fact, from the book Drawdown, which is one of my go-to tomes. I don't know if you've read
No.
Project Drawdown. Quick plug. They're not a sponsor, but they should be. But a quick plug for Project Drawdown. They talk about like the top 80 things that decisions you can make, and refrigeration is constantly, top 1, 2 in terms of reducing the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. So you have the refrigeration, and then you guys have a fleet too. Is that right?
We do.
So what does that, is that delivery between stores or into stores?
So I mentioned we have a number of what we call retail support centers, distribution centers. So our fleet, which is about 200 vehicles large, is taking product mostly from the distribution centers out to our stores. We, as of now, a large portion, not all, but a large portion of our fleet is already relying on alternative energy. It's a combination of CNG and electricity. And by the 2040 deadline, our entire fleet will be running on alternative fuels.
So you're looking at electrifying the fleet or hydrogen or?
So right now, we know we have CNG. We know CNG is not the all and be all, but it's a good step away from the traditional fueling.
You can move to RNG or renewable natural gas.
Okay,
which is another source.
But to your point, hydrogen cells, things like that, we're looking into. It's it's right now electricity and CNG, and really getting excited about when these other sources become scalable.
Awesome. And then what are some of the other factors, like food? Like how does actual food fit into the operation?
So that's a great question. So right now, as you kind of alluded to, it's the electricity, the refrigerants, and the fuels used to power our stores, our retail support centers, and our corporate offices. Plus, it's the energy used to get our product from point A to point B. So there are certain things out of scope. Right now, the thing about the entirety of the food chain and what any given product, before it gets to our warehouse, before it gets on our trucks, any given product takes to get from where it starts onto our shelves. That is outside of it. Things like the fuel we sell at Gecko is currently out of scope. And that's an important item too.
Yeah.
When you parallel something like that to what we did with single-use plastics and single-use plastic bags, it's really important to note that you have to take customers on the journey when they're able to go on that journey. So while I never want to assume that I know how someone should spend $1 of their money, reusable bags are pretty prolific throughout our communities. I'm only speaking from my experience. I've always have 10 of them in my car, and usually when I'm in the store, they're still in my car because I forget them.
That's always happens.
Right. But when you think about the cars on the road, and the number of people currently making that transition to something like electric vehicles, it's not there yet. So if we just cut ties tomorrow and said we're only selling
electricity,
right? We're only selling electricity. Our customers aren't ready to go on that journey with us. So it's really starting with the things that we have holistic control of. Let's use that and achieve that net zero, while also on this journey finding other ways to grow that.
So that's starting to put more electric vehicle charging stations over time at Get-Go's?
Absolutely. We have in Pittsburgh, I should say Western Pennsylvania, one's down in Washington, PA. I think we're at 3 Tesla charging stations right now, and then a number of other non-Tesla branded charging stations as well.
It's a tough process. I mean, we're in the midst of putting a electric charging fueling depot at 2nd Avenue now.
Yeah.
And to help support the city's fleet, and it's always a lesson. Every week it's you need to get this permit, or this is the type of conduit you need to use, or we need to bring this partner in, and it's a frontier.
Yeah.
It's a place that, frankly, like whether it's PennDOT or Duquesne Light or our own internal people, we've never installed electric vehicle charging units before.
Sure.
So it's this education that, once you just, you install the first one, it's tough. The second one gets a little easier. The third one's easier than that. But that's one of those things that we all have to kind of game plan, I think, in our head.
Well, right. There's charging stations and there's supercharging station. And then there's, to your point of it's admirable that folks like yourself in the city and others are being leaders. The challenge of being leaders is you're learning as you go, and the moment you install the one, you realize, there's now a new one to install. It's better.
That's interesting. You bring up the spot of leadership. I mean, Giant Eagle is definitely a leader in this space. I think the first, or maybe the second, I'm going to say the first privately held corporate company that has made a carbon neutrality pledge in Pittsburgh. I know the city, the University of Pittsburgh have made these commitments. What's it going to take for others to start to step into this space in terms of not just making the pledge? That's like the important first step.
Very good point.
That's the first, the first step you take in a 1,000-mile journey is the most important one, right?
Yep.
But what's it going to take for other corporate leaders to start to step into that space, do you think?
I think it's dialogue. Honestly, you make a great point that the public announcement, I think, is really important. It's important that other businesses and other folks in our community know that we're raising our hands, but it's that first step. Now what we need to do is continue to be transparent and to show people the progress.
Yeah.
Because when you see someone else and you see, everything all of us, not we, Giant Eagle, all of us are doing is some version of hard. None of this is turnkey.
It's not easy.
But to see someone do something, they did that. I bet we can do it too. Or they've stepped up, they've challenged themselves, they've had some progress. We should do that too. So I feel really good about keeping open lines of communication with our business partners, whether it's the Allegheny Conference or whomever. Finding ways to share best practices, to share progress, and we think that's a path forward.
We had Justine Russo on a couple months ago from Pitt Ohio Express, and one of the things that she said she said a lot of things that were interesting, but one of the things that was interesting was how suppliers are starting to they're a leader in the logistics space in terms of sustainability. One of the things that's driven them beyond their own leadership has been their customers and their suppliers. So on both sides, pushing them as well. So requiring them to do X or looking to put a sustainable product out there or asking questions about what types of fuel they're using. Have you started to see that in the food space and retail as well?
So I'm going to bridge back to single-use plastics, if I may. Walk through a Giant Eagle, walk through whatever your local supermarket is, and keep an eye out for the amount of single-use plastics. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, staggering.
And you think about national brands, local brands who are relying on this, and that's not a fault. That's just the reality of where we are today. It's chicken or egg, right? Let's pick on a national brand carbonated beverage. Is it the retailers who are going to that national brand saying, hey, we need to move the needle on this? Is it the national brand coming to the retailers and saying, we're heading in this direction, you got to go on the journey with us? The answer is both, right? But that's the give and take. I mean, typical Giant Eagle has 50,000 different products.
Wow.
So that's a lot of conversations on a lot of products to make a lot of progress, and fully invested in doing it. But it is as simple as it is. It's open conversations, open dialogue. It's an open commitment. This is important to me. I hope it's important to you as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Maybe one last question here, just as we come up on time. So much has transpired over the last couple years here. Big commitments for you guys with regards to the carbon neutrality, the plastic reduction, and then you throw a pandemic into kind of a mix in that. What are some of the things that you guys are looking at out into the near future in terms of steps forward or things on the horizon that, we're going to have to tackle this or knock this domino over in order to kind of get to the next step?
Yeah, so I think, and again, where we are, at least as of this week with the pandemic and not really sure what the fall is going to bring, but keeping an eye on our communities in terms of that food insecurity. The need never goes away, but if we start to see that increase again, then we have to be there for our communities. Also tackling things like waste. We haven't talked about waste today. Waste, oddly enough, has a huge direct line to food insecurity, right?
Certainly.
One of the best ways you can do is
food waste,
reduce.
Just to be.
Well, I think zero waste in general, but food waste in particular as it relates to food insecurity. Thank you for the clarification. So understanding how do we best tackle those kinds of issues, and then as far as the pandemic's concerned, continue to be there for the community. Giant Eagle pharmacists have administered more than 700,000 vaccines since the pandemic began. We got to continue to get more folks vaccinated. Vastly appreciate everyone's perspective, everyone's concerns, health issues, what have you. Anything we can do to increase that dialogue, going back to understanding what the other person's shoes are, understanding what are your challenges, what are your concerns, and just being open about that too. So how do we continue to be a leader in that space?
Truly critical. Dan Donovan, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for your leadership and for really having such great corporate citizens and people at the helm, such as yourself at a company like Giant Eagle. It's important for all of us here in southwestern Pennsylvania and beyond in terms of having you guys taking the leadership role that you have. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. That means the world, that feedback, and thank you for this platform. It's getting as much information and as much more conversation as we can. Will be better for all of us.
Terrific. So thanks so much to Dan Donovan and the great people at Giant Eagle. Thank you for listening into The Dirt, and thanks to our friends and sound engineers here at the Center for Media Innovation at Point Park University. I'm your host, Grant Ervin. Thanks for listening to The Dirt, and we'll check you out on the next episode. Take care. Thanks.